here's my comprehensive Cambridge Audio Melomania P100 review. And for context, I'm going to be putting it up against most of its direct competition, including the newer Bose and Wilkins Px7 S3, Sony WH-1000XM6, Sennheiser Momentum 4, Apple AirPods Max, Bose QuietComfort Ultra, and even the high-end headphones like the Bathys and Bang & Olufsen H95. You may be wondering, can this $240 headphone actually compete with the high-end headphones that cost between $700 to $1,000? And the short answer is yes, but there are some key flaws to this product which you should be aware of before making a purchase. Hey there, if you're new to recordingnow.com, we purchase every single product we review with our own money on a mission to build one of the most comprehensive databases of honest, unbiased headphone and wireless earbud reviews, head-to-head comparisons, and overall rankings to help you make a more informed purchase. Also, I use my background in pro audio to create custom EQ settings for all of these headphones to get the most sound quality potential out of them. I actually already have 2 EQ settings for the P100, which we'll get into in the sound quality section. To access those EQ settings, click the link to the full blog post in the video description or in a pinned comment below, scroll down to the sound quality section, or use the chat bot in the bottom right and enter the model name plus EQ. Alright, so real quickly, the P100 was one of the most highly requested headphone models in the comments, and to show you a preview of what's in the pipeline is the JBL Tour 1 M3 and the Marshall Monitor 3. We went out and purchased these headphones based on your suggestions in the comments, so if there's a headphone, earbud, or comparison you want to see in the near future, leave in the comments below and we'll look into it. Alright, so jumping into the first category of comfort, the P100 is one of the heaviest headphones tested in this class, weighing in at just under 330 grams. In fact, there's only 2 headphones that are heavier, which is the Bathys at 350 grams and the Apple AirPods Max at 387 grams. So that weight is a drawback to these headphones, combined with the fact that there's barely any cushioning here for the headband, which is quite tough. But what I do like about these is the ear pad cushions, which are quite supportive, and the fact that these have a lot of interior ear cup space, so my ears are free inside the ear cups and barely touching anything. I still find these fairly comfortable, so I give them a 4.0 out of 5, but these can definitely be improved. So moving on to features, build quality, battery life, and noise canceling performance, which we'll combine into a single score. So starting with the premium hardshell case we do get, it is one of the largest in this class, but it is nice and durable. Alright, so the P100 is relatively newer and was just released July 2024, so less than a year old. And these feature most of your modern wireless noise canceling headphone features like Bluetooth 5.3 with aptX lossless and adaptive, multi-point connection, wear detection with automatic play pause, and one of the more interesting features is a user replaceable battery. Now, moving on to build quality, I find that the P100 is one of the better headphones in this class, and it actually reminds me of the Bose and Wilkins headphones, where we have metal here on the ear cup exterior. We have some premium leather on the ear pad cushions and on the exterior of the headband, although I wish that was on the interior instead of this fabric material here. But we do have plastic here for the hinges, and sometimes when wearing these and moving around, I do get some slight creaking, but overall these feel solid, especially for the money. Now, moving on to battery life, the P100 actually is the class leader with 100 hours of battery life on a single charge. The only 2 headphones that come close are the Sennheiser Momentum 4 at 60 hours, which was the previous class leader, and the Marshall Monitor 3 at 70 hours. Also, having that user replaceable battery is a nice touch to make these more consumer friendly and a little bit more future proof. Now, moving on to the noise canceling performance of the P100, and unfortunately, I think this is one of the biggest flaws of these headphones. Actually, one more flaw that I want to mention before I forget is the fact that these look a little bit goofy when worn. So if you look at this is how the headphones looks when they're on your head, and they have quite a wide headband. So this is something to note if you're considering wearing these out in public. I do think these would make me a little self-conscious. Now, back to the noise canceling performance. So the noise canceling is definitely doing something, and it reminds me of the Sennheiser Momentum 4 in terms of its strength. It might be slightly worse and slightly less consistent, but certainly the P100 isn't on the level of the Apple AirPods Max, the newer Sony XM6, the Bose QC Ultra, or the new Bose and Wilkins Px7 S3. I would personally put these at the bottom of the class for noise canceling. It's better than nothing, and it is doing something when it's on, but these just wouldn't be my pick if noise canceling was one of your top priorities. So for features, build quality, battery life, noise canceling performance, I give the P100 a 4.0 out of 5. Yes, that battery life is extremely impressive, but honestly, after 60 hours like the Momentum 4, it's diminishing returns, and there are more important aspects like that noise canceling performance. Alright, so moving on to sound quality, which is where these headphones really shine and what they're known for. So initially listening to this headphone completely stock right out of the box, it usually takes me some time to get used to to a headphone sound profile, especially testing so many of these headphones back to back, but the P100 immediately impressed me, and I immediately got this sense of a wide soundstage and great spacing between instruments and vocals. Prior to the P100, I was spending a lot of time testing the newer Sony XM6 and the Bowers & Wilkins Px7 S3, and I immediately noticed that the soundstage just felt more spacious than both of those headphones. So we're already off to a good start there. Next thing is the sound profile, which is closer to my preference. These are very detailed and revealing headphones with excellent dynamics, and it just so happens that the stock sound profile is actually very close to my personal listening preference. So in addition to that wide soundstage, we have so much treble detail that's not harsh or sibilant like the Sony XM6, but there's also a lot of sub bass to make these engaging to listen to. What these kind of reminded me of is studio monitor headphones, but not as boring or neutral, with a lot more sub bass. So that's the stock sound. It's already really impressive, but when we add in the 7-band EQ from the Cambridge Audio app, one notable thing about the P100 is that it takes EQ very, very well, which is usually a sign of superior hardware. And I've started off by adding 2 EQ settings to the website. To access those, visit the full blog post in the video description or in the pinned comment below. We've got V1 for pop and hip hop and V2 for rock and metal. My only gripe with the EQ is that there isn't clear steps or increments inside the app, so you're pretty much just gonna have to eyeball my settings to try them out. All right, so let's talk about the sound quality after EQ and then do some sound comparisons between all of these headphones. So although I like the stock sound profile, which is literally called flat inside of the app, I think most consumers would appreciate if these had a little bit more of an exciting and consumer-friendly sound. They could be a little fuller in the mids, and they could also use some more upper or mid bass. So that's pretty much the goal of my EQ settings. All right, so moving on to the sound comparison, starting with the XM6, this has a bigger sound stage, which makes the XM6 sound very upfront in comparison. The P100 is immediately the more audiophile headphone with its better separation, layering, and depth. The XM6 is noticeably warmer and slightly fuller with its bass and lower mids, but it's not as detailed or crisp as the P100. Now, moving on to the Px7 S3, so this is a lot closer than the XM6 in terms of just pure sound quality. The S3 is noticeably V-shaped out of the box, and it is more consumer-friendly versus the P100, which is more balanced and flat. Again, that larger soundstage and better spacing on the P100 is just immediately impressive. Where I think the Px7 shines is that the bass seems more impactful and fuller, whereas the P100 is cleaner, and it's not as punchy. It's really focused more on the super low sub-bass response. Honestly, I lean towards the P100 having higher sound quality as a whole, but I could see a lot of people preferring the V-shaped sound of the Px7 S3. I just wish the Bowers & Wilkins EQ was as effective as the P100 or the Sony XM6's 10-band EQ. So the AirPods Max has the most similar sound profile to the P100 with a very detailed treble and present bass response. The separation and layering of the AirPods Max is something that still impresses me, but I do think the P100 matches it there. I'm hearing just a little bit more detail and resolution and better dynamics with the P100. When it comes to the bass, the P100 is better in that low-end sub-bass response with some nice quantity and slam, whereas the AirPods Max is focused more on that mid-bass punchiness. I think the AirPods Max gets a little closer to the P100 in terms of its soundstage, but overall, I think the X factor is having that very effective 7-band EQ for the P100 versus the AirPods Max lacking that native custom EQ. All right, so the QC Ultra with the V2 EQ. Surprisingly, listening to these back to back, these might be two of the most similar in terms of that level of detail and tonality. So if you listen back to back, both of these headphones actually sound very, very similar. And again, we're talking about the QC Ultra with the V2 EQ. The P100 sounds less compressed with higher resolution and better dynamics. And then the bass is fuller and deeper on the P100 with a bit more slam and quantity. But the clean sub bass actually does sound really nice on the QC Ultra, even listening back to back. All right, so the Momentum 4 with V2 EQ as well. This is one of the closer matches when it comes to the audiophile technicalities like the dynamics, the soundstage, the separation. The Momentum 4 is very competitive with the P100. Now, I'm hearing a bit more detail on the P100 with slightly crisper dynamics. I think the bass sounds a bit tighter and cleaner on the P100, but both are really fun to listen to thanks to their sub bass. Again, an X factor here is that I think that the P100 takes EQ better than the Momentum 4, even though the Sennheiser EQ is fairly effective. I think that the hardware under the hood is superior with the P100. It's a little easier to mold and shape the sound with EQ, whereas the Momentum 4 required a lot of tinkering. All right, so now we're getting into the high end, and these are two of the best sounding headphones under $1,000 in the wireless noise canceling class, we have the Focal Bathys up first. So I was reading online, some people were comparing the P100 to the Bathys, and even in favor of the P100, saying that it's clearly better than the Bathys, and that had me really skeptical, to be honest. But after listening to these headphones back to back, I will say they are firmly in the same tier of sound quality, which is very impressive for the budget price P100, which is a fraction of the cost of the Bathys. Now, what's interesting is when I listen to these back to back, it sounds like there's a veil over the Focals versus the very detailed, very crisp P100. But as I listen more, I think what's initially construed as a veil is actually having fuller mids and a more balanced tonality of the Bathys. And the advantage to the P100 thus far has been that big soundstage, but I think the Bathys matches it and then some when it comes to having that spacious soundstage with great spacing, separation, and layering. These are two of the more open back sounding headphones in this class. So although this was close, I actually found myself listening to the Bathys even long past when I was done comparing them. I actually forgot that I was doing a comparison. I just kept listening to the Bathys. That's how great they sound. Overall, the Bathys is a more engaging and fun headphone to listen to while matching the audiophile technicalities of the P100 and even surpassing it in terms of that soundstage, the spacing, and the timbre by having better mid response that is more natural. All right, last but not least, we have the $1,000 or perhaps the market price is closer to $700 on the Bang & Olufsen H95. So immediately, the H95 has a more similar sound profile to the P100 versus the Bathys. Both of these headphones focus on resolving treble detail, matched with plenty of deep sub bass. There's not as much of a veil on the H95 because this is a brighter headphone with more recessed mids similar to the P100. Now, interestingly, the P100 actually sounded like the more balanced headphone, but the H95 was a bit more exciting and consumer friendly. A slight drawback to the H95 is that its treble is a little harsher and tinier at times. So between these two, it's more of a toss-up, but I might slightly lean towards the H95 as being the more engaging and fun headphone to listen to, whereas the P100 may be more technically accurate. All right, so we put the P100 through its paces, and I walk away thinking that the P100 is firmly in the top 3 for pure sound quality as it is. So overall, it receives a 9.3 out of 10 after EQ, which is one of the highest scores we've given out for pure sound quality to this day. All right, so moving on to value, the P100 retails at $279 USD, but is currently available brand new for just $239. And again, we're comparing this headphone to high-end headphones costing $700 to $1,000 brand new. So without a doubt, this is easily one of the best sound quality per dollar values in the wireless over-ear noise canceling headphone class, and thus I'm giving it a perfect 5 out of 5 value score, which is very rare and has only happened a couple times on the website. But I just want to throw in the caveat here that this score is mostly for its sound quality, as it could still improve with its comfort and definitely its noise canceling performance. All right, so overall, tallying up all the scores, the P100 receives an 8.9 out of 10. So I've already given its praises about the sound quality, but again, I want to mention the drawbacks that you must be aware of before purchasing these headphones. And first off, it is one of the heaviest headphones I've tested. That's going to negatively impact its comfort score. Next, the noise canceling performance is something that is towards the bottom of the barrel here. Next, I do want to mention that when you are wearing these, they can tend to look a little bit silly because of this wide headband look. But if you're okay with all of the above, then this is simply one of the best values in consumer audio today. In addition to the sound quality, we have a new class leader at 100 hours of battery life on a single charge. That's also user replaceable. Really cool feature there that I haven't seen in any of these other headphones. So if you found this comprehensive review and comparison helpful, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment below. If you want to help support the channel and help support our mission, consider using our affiliate links in the video description and in the pinned comment below, which can actually help save you money. Another way to support the channel is simply by using the website recordingnow.com as a resource to help you make your next purchase. Maybe share it with someone who's shopping for headphones. If you want to keep researching headphones, I'm going to link a relevant video and a playlist so you can keep watching next. Thanks for watching and happy listening.